Oh yeah, talking about going live. What's up, peoples? Hey, it's Galen. This is Culture Drop Live. We're doing the thing. It's 11 o'clock. Pacific time, all the business. So, if people show up, leave a comment, say hello. Love to see where people are, like, where are you from, where do you work, all that kind of stuff. So, check in and say hello. Excited about today's show. This is the penultimate Culture Drop Live. This is our last. Next week is our last week. So, Chris, what's up, Chris? Good to see you. Thanks for popping in. So that's it. Also, probably my favorite topic in the universe to talk about today. Culture. Am I right? It's good stuff. So, let's see. This is what we do every Thursday, 11 o'clock. And so we generally take the topic from the Culture Drop email from this Tuesday, which was like 5 do's and don'ts of creating great culture inside teams, and then sort of like pick that apart and also do kind of a Q&A. Just a Q&A, sort of like ask me anything sort of format here. So, Raibara 13. Who are you? Cool. Ralph, what's up? Okay, hey Ralph. Thanks for joining. Love it. Cool. So, we always start every week with a poll on Instagram. We do a poll, and Carrie on my team has been running them. Also, Carrie, Emily, Jay on my team are all here in the comments as well. Hello, team. You're amazing. The poll this week was, and this whole month has been sort of micro New Year's resolutions. So, just like intentions for the year. This one, choose between the two, and it was like either be more creative or be more active. And active won by a landslide. It was 70% of people said like be more active this year. People probably want to be more creative too, but that's all the thing. So good. That's sort of like kicking it off and getting to talk about kind of like some culture stuff today in the email, the video that went out, and then also in the blog. Like I mentioned, this for like 5 do's and don'ts. I think Emily just linked the link to the blog that has everything kind of like written out and maybe a little bit more detail. So here were my 5 do's and don'ts. The 5 that I had were, number one, be clear about what is your culture, define your culture, which I want to talk about that a little bit because that's important to me. And number 2, become obsessed with employee experience. I think it's really something critical for culture is like when companies are very intentional about employee experience, then they do culture well because it's just sort of like how they show up and choices that they make about processes, systems, etc. Like putting the employees first and having them be a priority makes a huge difference. Build a culture of feedback, super huge. The sort of like the backbone of great relationships and communication is around feedback. And I think that like feedback is how we eliminate blind spots, how we improve, how we grow and learn. Feedback is just, it's so critical. When we can't give real honest feedback, or we don't get real or honest feedback as part of a team or as a human being or in any relationship, we can't grow or learn. And then things they stay left unsaid, not dealt with, and not improved, and then they lead to like symptoms of that, which is just problems and chaos and broken relationships, etc. So feedback, super critical. Great leaders only. That was number 4. I'm like obsessed about this. Leaders inside organizations need to be great. It is how your employees, it is their most direct impact of how employees experience the culture of your organization, as well as like how they feel about their jobs. Feeling supported, listened to by a boss or a leader who is fantastic makes all the difference in the world for retention and just job performance and satisfaction. So huge on that. And then number 5 was like healthy, courageous communication. So talking about like people need to have the skills inside your organization to have courageous conversations, to be able to give and receive feedback with grace, to resolve conflict, basically to be able to say the shit that needs to be said to each other, and hear those things, navigate those types of situations, which is something to like invest in training and make sure your people can do that. So those were the 5 do's. And I'm curious of the people that are here, which of those, if you had to pick one of those 5 that you think is most important, I'd love to hear, like, what do you think? And then my 5 don'ts were like, no talking shit huge. Creating a zero tolerance policy around like people bad mouthing other people, gossiping, the rumor mill, all that kind of stuff. I think you have to like from day one establish an organization like that shit does not fly here, and create that as a norm. Like normalize the fact that people don't do that, and when other people do it, people shut it down. I think that's huge. Like just toxic language and sort of people putting each other down is killer to culture and human beings and relationships. Number 2, don't spend all your time focused on low frequency behavior. So that my sort of conversation around that was like, don't focus on just creating policies, and like basically don't spend your time focusing on the worst behavior of your poorest performing employees, right? That is probably 10 or 15% of your workforce. Focus on coaching those people into greatness, but like stay up here. Your people who are great and responsible and accountable employees are bored and demotivated by leaders spending all of their time focused on like the shittiest employees that you have and dealing with like all the drama they're stirring up or their inability to do their jobs effectively. It's like coach those people or get them out of your organization. Don't spend all your time on them. Number 3, don't rely on the skill sets of your people as they are today, which is basically just another way of saying like train people, invest in personal skill development, give people nonviolent communication training, give them training around how to give and receive feedback, these types of things. I think really critical. People aren't necessarily coming into your organization with these skills and this knowledge and this know-how. So, train them, invest in them. That's books, videos. I have a ton of videos. There's so many free resources or paid resources out there that are high quality and awesome that you can use to train people and have conversations. So important. Number 4, don't be precious about the way you've always done things. I think that's a killer for culture, is organizations just being like stagnant, not adapting, not changing, not growing, not learning. I think that kills engagement, performance, motivation. And the last one is like another zero tolerance policy, which is no assholes. You should be able to promise as an organization that like the people that you hire and the people that work for you is like, you will never have to work with anybody here who's an asshole. Like we don't accept asshole-ish behavior, define what that means and what that looks like, and like be clear about that. But man, that's huge. So that's really quickly kind of like going through. Those were my sort of 10 about culture that I think are important. Culture is probably my favorite topic. All the training and stuff that I do around skill development, communication, these other things are also like lead into how can we be better as a team, right? By focusing on growing each individual, but like also us being intentional about how we show up. So yeah, good. That was me talking for a while. Any thoughts, feelings, anything people would like add to that you think I missed in either category, or questions about? The thing that like, of course, I'm always excited to talk about is sort of like that number 1 do, which is like define your culture. But yeah, here goes. Our investment in emotional intelligence has been a game changer for our agency, especially as we rolled into this pandemic. Hell yes, emotional intelligence, man. There's so many aspects of that, right? Like personal self-management, emotional behavior management, understanding the importance of building relationships. But really, I think that the biggest piece about starting to have conversations in teams around emotional intelligence, and I'd be curious to hear your input on this of like what you think was the biggest game changer, but I think it's just the self-awareness piece. People starting to think about like, how am I showing up? How am I behaving? How am I treating other people? And what impact does it have on people around me? The ability to like interpret other people's emotions and have more courageous conversations and have a growth mindset, those types of things. But yeah, I'd be curious what you see, Ralph, as the sort of like, what was the biggest kind of like game changer? What you noticed the most for that? Because I think, just a focus in conversations around building emotional intelligence for human beings and on teams is critical. So yeah. And especially for the pandemic, right? Because now we're going through times of huge change and upset and challenge, and that is times when emotional intelligence shines, right? And leaders, people having a growth mindset, understanding that change is, even if it's difficult, that it's normal and it's part of growth. And like, I think that's, all those things are so important. Emotional intelligence to me is like, hire people for that, focus on that, develop that in your people. There's so many aspects of it, right? So cool. But yeah, any other thoughts, questions people have? Like, what would you add to that? What would you take or take away or disagree with? Ralph might be typing in response to what I said, or something there for them for their agency. But the one thing in the blog, I go into like a little bit, more detail. It's still kind of high level, but that number one around like defining your culture. This is something that when I talk to leaders and organizations, I feel like I'm rowing a canoe up a tree to explain to people how you do culture. That like culture is not a list of obvious corporate values like trust and integrity and respect and Those sound cool. They don't do shit to like impact how people behave every day in their jobs unless you define those values in behaviors and integrate it into what people actually do. And so I talked about that in the blog of like, for most organizations, the way they approach culture is this very like these broad concepts that are like loosely defined and never talked about again, and thinking that like, all the organizations that have toxic, silos between departments and toxic leaders and like gossip and just like horrible places to work, the corporate values of those places are respect, trust, teamwork, fun, blah. Those are great concepts. I'm not saying that like trust and respect are things you don't want, but to tactically approach that, to say, how do you build those things? What are the behaviors behind that build trust? Like giving and receiving feedback with grace builds trust. So let's focus on like that behavior versus the concept of trust. It's such a waste of time. And leadership teams, executive leadership teams, to be like, we did this 3-day offsite and we paid this consultant to come in and help us, define our core values. It's like, I can save you a lot of money and a lot of time. You're going to come out of that room and you're going to say trust, respect, integrity, right, fun, and excellence. It's like that's not effective. It's the work to be done to put that into practice in your organization. So anyways, I could never stop talking about that. It's so critical and important, and my favorite thing to help sort of teams unpack and understand in a deeper way. Ralph, yes, definitely the self-awareness, leading the way, not just saying self-care is important, but as management engaging in self-care. Yep, all elements of emotional intelligence are so important. Self-awareness, leading the way, right, walking the walk, right, that sort of like that sense of integrity, relationship building, that sort of thing. So super important stuff. All right, cool. Thanks, Emily. Said a thing that I do that well. I try to. Our team's pretty great. Anyways, what's next on the old agenda here? Stuff. Let's see. Inviting Galen to a regional leadership meeting was part of that culture change. Sweet. See? Big deal. I know. It's like just changing people's mindsets about how they approach some of these things that, is so important. I think it's really, really important. So that's awesome to hear that, Ralph. I love it. Cool. So I don't know. We only have one more of these lives left. That's me sort of like yammering on, I think, as much as I want to about those topics. Any other Q&A? What things are going on with people? Any topics people want to like dive into, or how do we do this? Or I don't know. Anything on people's minds? Just like the opportunity for getting into like whatever people want. I'm sure that Shelby's view didn't hurt Galen too much. Yeah. I love a nice view. Going to talk to like, companies and doing stuff. Also, the beach, the ocean, California, some beautiful landscape down there. So, Emily has a question. Yes, Emily, what's your question? On my team, are you asking for time off? You can have time off. We have unlimited PTO. Emily's gonna type a question. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. Hope you guys like my new background. I made some adjustments. I put up my like opportunity rover picture that I got myself. That was my Christmas present to myself. Love it. Just move things around today. Okay, what do we got, Emily? I've had situations in other jobs where someone was exhibiting a lot of low-level behavior towards me. It was hard to know when to bring my leader in. Oh, yeah. Okay, good one. So this is a challenging one, right? Where you have employee to employee. You have another employee, a coworker, who is, So Emily, again, can you speak to that balance where you don't want to be associated with the low-level behavior by bringing it up to your boss, but also don't want it to continue? Yeah, and when you say don't want to be associated with it by bringing it up to your boss, you mean like telling on someone or having them think that you're like stirring in drama with this other person? Just a clarification. But I think this is an interesting conversation because how do you get into, correcting the behavior of a coworker who, there's a dynamic there obviously on teams where like you don't have the authority to hold them accountable necessarily. You can't say, hey, if this doesn't change, like your job is at stake, which you can do as a leader, but not as a coworker. So, I think that so there's a lot of elements of this. The hard thing is that people that are generally exhibiting pretty like toxic behavior are usually, and I'm stereotyping or generalizing, but like I also know I'm right, they're generally people who have low emotional intelligence, which means that they're not easy to have a conversation with. If you have people that are being very toxic or bullying or, abusive or really abrasive in some way or hard to work with, generally people that exhibit that kind of behavior in the workplace are also not great at navigating conflict or having challenging conversations. They're generally not open to feedback, very defensive. That's usually the sort of like dynamic there. I still think it's important to try to have that conversation directly with the person that you're having that issue with before sort of involving your boss. It's kind of the benefit of the doubt. It's just a more like mature move to make, but how to approach that conversation with them is really sticky and very tactical, because framing it up the right way, right, approaching that where it doesn't make things worse can be really challenging. And I think that's the value again of investing in yourself. Like, Fierce Conversations is a great book, but like go and investigate and like look for ways to like level up your own skills and the ability to have those kinds of challenging conversations, which is like, are you very well versed in like nonviolent communication and ways to like de-escalate people who are very emotional or, being irrational? Like, if you have the tools in your like just as a human being to do that, it will help you in your romantic relationships and like every interaction that you have. So I'm always a huge fan of like, you should constantly be leveling yourself up and well versed in that kind of stuff, because when you need those skills, like that's when you need them, is like in the moment, and they're very needed. So just a thought there, but approaching that person first. And I think I've talked about this in different culture drop videos and stuff too, is around like giving feedback or diving into those difficult conversations. So I think generally it's sort of approaching that person to say, hey, not just hitting them out of the blue, like setting up a time when in cold blood. So not when they've pissed you off or you're upset about something or you're heated or like not feeling emotionally neutral. Go to them at a time when like things are pretty smooth and calm and you're not feeling heated, and just be like, hey, if you're open to it, I'd love to have a conversation. Or I think a nice way to approach this with a boss or a difficult person is to say, I would like to get your input on something. I'd like to like pick your brain, get your perspective on something that I'm sort of like dealing with, and hear your thoughts around it. I think that's a really nice way into that conversation, even if it's about them and some behavior that they're exhibiting that you don't like, because it immediately doesn't put them on the defensive. If you say, hey, I'm coming to you for some advice or perspective, I want to kind of pick your brain and get your thoughts on something that I'm sort of like dealing with. Generally, that puts people immediately into a mode of like, I want to help you, or like, you're asking me for advice, so people can feel important, right? Or like, which is, when you feel important and useful and helpful, usually you're not in a defensive place. You're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, what is it? And I think it can be like, the experience I'm having is this. I think language that doesn't accuse other people as well is really useful. So going and say, you never listen to me, or you always this, or you that. Like, if you accuse other people of behavior that's negative, or label them, you're a negative person, or you never like my ideas, people immediately become defensive, right? They want to like defend against that, prove it not right. Like, right? It creates a fight and an argument. As opposed to saying, hey, I'm having this experience, or when we have these types of interactions together, they don't feel great. And the experience that I'm having is this, and I want to get your perspective on this, because, I want to know from your perspective how I could show up differently. Is there a way that I could present ideas to you? Or is there a way that I could sort of like do my work or communicate with you in a different way that would make these interactions feel better? And maybe like before even getting into that, I would just love to hear your perspective of like, what is your experience around these things? Do you notice that? Are you having an experience that's less than awesome, when we interact? And truly, I'm not here to like, make you feel bad or whatever. I just like, our working relationship is important to me, right? And the smoother that we can communicate and work together, the better it is for both of us. And like my intention here is to be like, these things don't feel great, and can we make this better for both of us? Like, is that possible? So I'm just like, I'd like to get your perspective. I'm like, what are you experiencing? What's going on for you? Is there anything I'm doing that makes your life harder, or that like a way that I'm communicating or showing up that is challenging for you? Because if I'm not aware of that, I can't change that. So I think that's some of those language, some of those like word tracks and tools are helpful to like diffuse people, make them feel less defensive. And I think that like starting with that conversation is a great way. If they can't stop, if that has no end, if they don't want to talk to you, if they're fucking terrible and miserable and toxic, which that may be the result, I think then going to have a conversation with like HR or your leader to say, hey, I approached them, I had this conversation, we didn't really get anywhere with it. And again, I think with a boss, instead of telling on someone or going to HR to tell on them, I think, it's a lot more accountability on your end. It makes you look better if you say, hey, I'm coming to you not to tell on this person. I would like your advice. I want to know how you think I can handle this situation or deal with it. It makes them aware of what's going on, but you're also coming asking for advice as opposed to like, Cheryl's an asshole. So I think that it also makes you look better to say, I'm not really sure what to do here. I try to approach it directly and have the conversation. This was the result. And I feel like we need some outside help to sort of like solve this or resolve it or deal with it. Or, and again, I think going in, even if you're having that conversation with your boss or HR, it's, can I get your perspective? This is what I've tried. I want to hear what you're thinking. Maybe there's blind spots. Like, am I not seeing something as their way I'm showing up that can be better? But I think asking for perspective, asking for advice from that person, makes it appear less like you're tattling on somebody else. It separates you from the behavior that's happening. And it also shows like emotional maturity and like, I want to resolve this in a peaceful way. I'm not here to make anyone look bad or anything. This doesn't feel great. And I think it can be improved. And I'm beyond the capacity of what I think I can handle to make that situation better myself. I need your help. So that's some thoughts. I hope some of that is useful. I know that's a hard conversation because, there's just a dynamic. How do you hold coworkers accountable? How do you change their behavior? And if they're, being mean to you or bullying you or they're just serving up bullshit in the office, it's like, how do you deal with that productively? So that's sort of like my advice. I know that, every relationship is different. The context of these kind of conversations is very different from person to person, but those are some tips. Cool. I know I talked for a while, but that's a great question. I think it's a really, really important topic. Yeah, good. I know we've covered that in Culture Drop, but we should probably just do a Culture Drop that is basically that exact thing again, because I think it's really useful and a good reminder for people. If you work with people that are challenging, what are some like tools to like tell your boss or whatever kind of thing, in a way that makes you look good, that doesn't make them look bad, but that like really truly focuses on how can we resolve this? How can we make this better? How can we improve this? I think that's, when that is your intention, as opposed to making someone look bad or making yourself look good, it's easier to actually find a resolution with that person, because ultimately that's what we want, is to continue to work together, but to improve that relationship, strengthen that relationship, create more boundaries, create deeper understanding of where both of you are coming from, and improve. So cool. Oh, Gary's here. What's up, Gary? Good to see you. Yeah, asking for help is powerful. It's true. It's a great way. And I think that conversation is almost the same exact thing if it's your boss. If your boss is the one who is exhibiting terrible behavior and, you feel like they're bullying you, whatever, I still think it's great to approach that conversation and say, hey, I would love to get your perspective. I'd love to pick your brain, just see what you think about this and hear what you have to think. Immediately putting somebody on, in a space where they're like, I can help you, I can be of value here, like, or you're coming to me as the authority and you want to hear my perspective. Like, a lot of times people with low emotional intelligence, that triggers this side of them to feel important or have information over other people. So it's, it's a tricky psychology way that I don't think is unethical to sort of put someone in your corner as you start the conversation. So cool. And Ralph again said, oh, hi, Shauna. Good to see you. Yay. When the management team is continuing to build momentum in a positive direction, but one team member is not showing up like the rest of us, it's very difficult, especially when they use family as a reason why their time is more valuable than the rest of the team. Yeah, that can be really hard. and I think that just comes down to boundaries and inside an organization is like, what will you allow, what won't you, and extending grace to people, but also being really clear and direct around like, hey, this behavior, these very specific things, like this doesn't fly. It has to change. What do you need from me? How can I support you in that? I think those conversations can be really hard, but yeah, it's like one person sort of like shirking accountability for how they're behaving or being like, well, it's because of this or because of that. It's like, all of us have shit going on in our lives. We're still able to show up and be positive and like contribute here. And I think that's the importance of, back to the 10 do's and don'ts of culture, starting with like, define your culture. What are the rules of engagement of what everybody is held accountable to and how we're all expected to show up and agree to be held accountable to. When we have those very clearly defined, anytime somebody's acting out of alignment with those those rules of engagement, those code of conduct, like that, those sort of ground rules of your organization and your culture and your team, it's so easy to address because it's easy to measure. And you can say this specific behavior is out of alignment with our culture here. So like, I know that you have challenges and issues and like, I feel that and I want to support you, but like, what do you need from me to get you to where you need to be? Because your only option here is to show up in this way. And how do we do that, right? Like, I think, those are really challenging conversations, but so many times we let people off the hook and we allow behavior that is truly unacceptable or very disruptive, and everybody knows it but that person. And it's like somebody has to like do the work to like have that conversation, which again, fierce conversations, radical candor, crucial conversations. There's a ton of resources and books out there that help you be able to navigate those conversations with more skill, more precision, in a way that like gets you better results. And I think that's really critical. So, man, this is a long live, but I think some really great stuff in here for sure. Let's see. Oh, Jay from my team says my boss shows a lot of behavior when we're filming, a lot of sass. You know what, Jay? This isn't the place for that. You want to call me out? Just kidding. I love you. We have a lot of fun filming. It's very, very cool. Great. Okay, cool. We probably should wrap this up. People have jobs. I've got a lot of stuff to do. I love this live Q&A stuff. Like, great questions that came in. Emily, I hope some of that conversation at some point was like useful to all of you. And like Shauna, Gary, everybody, Chris, thanks for showing up. Ralph, thanks for the great questions and stuff. Obviously, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Down the road, we're going to be creating a podcast that's very fun. So look for that in the next like few months or so. But we've got a lot of stuff in the works. Racing to finish my book. We're creating some online leadership courses that are going to be like off the chain. We're launching Culture Core, which is the work that I do with teams to walk them through the step-by-step process of defining culture and like integrating culture. We're launching that as a sort of like mastermind group. So we would have like 5 or 6 organizations going through that work at the same time, with like, a mix of coaching from me as well as sort of access to each other and sort of like sharing best practices. So we've got a lot of stuff in the works. This year is going to be crazy. My team is like hard at work doing a lot of stuff. So it's great. But I love you all. Thank you so much for showing up and being here. This is cool. And like social media, Culture Drop, like subscribe to that if you aren't. But yeah, anyways, you guys are cool. I love you. Have a great week, rest of your weekend. Also, like, fuck the patriarchy. Yay for Kamala Harris. And this week was a great week in, restoring calm, sane communication and leadership to this country. So, regardless of political party, being kind is important, and I think we can all agree on that. So cool. I love you, people. Be great. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week for our very last live ever. Okay, cool. Peace out.